Hello, welcome to another Film Club episode, and today I'm going to be reviewing the 2017 film adaptation of Stephen King's It. Now, this honestly was one of my most anticipated releases of this year in terms of film. I've been waiting for this movie for over a year. Since they announced its inception, they've been trying to make this movie for some time, and it was one of those cases of you just didn't think it was going to work. You know, you're taking something that is not only a beloved book to many, many people, but you're also taking something that is a beloved TV miniseries from 1990. A lot of you out there like me grew up watching this movie as a kid, so seeing a big screen adaptation of this is something we've kind of always dreamed of, and I'm happy to come out on the other end of it and tell you guys that it's a really, really good movie. I'm going to preface this by giving you kind of a rundown of what it is. It is one of Stephen King's most famous works of all time. It tells the story of the Losers Club. This is a group of kids that are kind of outcasts from their school, and they band together to fight a possessive demon that takes the form of a clown in their small town. This is a demonic possession thing that appears once every 27 years. The original story is set in the 1950s, and then it flashed forward to the present day, which the present day when that book came out was the 1980s. They do a good job here of updating it so that this film takes place in 1989, and presumably chapter 2 is going to take place in 2017 or 2018 or whatever year the second part of this comes out. Now, it's important to note that until you watch this movie and get to the final credit roll, this movie is only referred to as Stephen King's It. However, when the film ends, it is referred to It Chapter 1. So this is the first of a two-part movie. Now, what did I think of It? What was my takeaway from this movie? I think they did a really good job with all things considered. I do have some minor gripes with it. There are some concerns. However, I think given the fact that the film has a runtime of 2 hours and 15 minutes, the amount of information and story elements that are crammed into this 2 hour and 15 minute movie is really well done. They do a good job of balancing all the characters and all the stories of the first half of this book into this movie, and it's really well done. Another thing I really like about this movie is, with the exception of Fred Wolfhard, who is the kid from Stranger Things, all of these kids are unknown actors and actresses, and that's awesome. I always like watching movies where you don't really know anybody actor-wise, and you get a real sense of people that are coming out, and they did a great job of casting these kids. And then I also have to tip my hat to Bill Skarsgård, who steps into Tim Curry's shoes as Pennywise the Clown. Now, that was the other big thing about this movie being made was, can it live up to the 1990 miniseries that we all grew up with? I'm pleased to say that yes, it does. I think the 2017 version of It can stand on its own as its own entity alongside the 1990 movie. Nobody's going to forget the 1990 miniseries. It's an excellent movie. It's not perfect by any means necessary, but it's something we all grew up with, we all enjoyed at the time. I'm actually thinking about sitting down and watching it again. It's been a couple of years since I've seen it. I'd like to watch it again and kind of compare the two, but this 2017 version is a very nice update to everything, and it's always nice to see, and it doesn't happen very often, but when a remake is so good that parts of it outshine the original, and that's what I will say that's really nice about the 2017 version of It. It has the budget, it has the surprises, it doesn't rely on gore or, shock, or in a sense, it's not a torture porn movie. You're not getting that sense of bloodshed every 5 minutes. With that being said, I was surprised in the first 5 minutes that they went ahead and went with the whole Pennywise biting Georgie's arm off and dragging him down to the sewers. I didn't think that was something that I was going to see in this movie, and there's a lot of violence towards children in this movie in a way that you don't really see in movies. And I thought that was pretty cool and interesting. Not that I think violence against children is cool, but just as we're saying here, I think that was cool to see in a film version, that they treated these characters in this story with the kind of respect that you would expect from something like this, and that's a great part of this movie. I think Bill Skarsgård does an excellent job as Pennywise. He makes the character his own. He's not trying to be Tim Curry from 1990. He's doing his own thing, and he excels. And one of the reasons why this film excels so much is he is sprinkled in. You don't get, the movie is 2 hours and 15 minutes. You're not getting 90 minutes of Pennywise here. You get him, he's a character that is used just at the right moments of the movie, and it never feels like they overdo him. It never feels like they throw him in too much. He is used the correct amount throughout the entire movie. This movie isn't so much about the character of Pennywise as it is about the relationships that these kids build with each other, and that was always the strong sense of what Stephen King's It is about. That being said, I think there are a little nitpicks I have with the film. I think some of the characters aren't explained as much as I would have liked. The character of Stan, the Jewish kid, his backstory in this movie is portrayed kind of lame. Like, his big fear is he's scared of a painting on his dad's wall in his dad's office. Like, that was kind of ridiculous to me. Another observation I had is they didn't really go into grand detail with all of these kids' parents. Like, a lot of these kids have at-home parental issues, and they don't really do much of that in this movie. Like, obviously you have the character of Beverly Marsh, who her dad is very abusive, and that's probably the only character, with the exception of, and I forget these characters' name, but with the exception of the kid who has the mom who's a germaphobe. The rest of the parents aren't really showcased in this movie. I don't think you ever see Richie's parents in this movie, which is kind of ridiculous. And, the main character, Bill, his parents are seen maybe once or twice throughout the entire movie, and I thought that was interesting as well. Like, it's more about these kids, but then they talk about their parental issues, but they don't really go into it as much detail as I was expecting this movie to dive into. That's not really necessarily to say that that's a weak part of the movie, but I was a little disappointed that they didn't do more with it, all things considered. I really like the jump from having this movie set from the 1950s to the 1980s, but I felt they could do more to showcase that it was the 1980s. The only real way you can tell it's the 1980s in this movie is a couple posters on Bill's wall of movies that came out in the 80s, like Beetlejuice and Gremlins. There are, in a couple shots when they are downtown in the fictional town of Derry, Maine, there's a shot of a theater, and at one point the 89 Batman's on there. Shout out to that. I thought that was awesome. And finally, there are a couple references to the band New Kids on the Block. If you cut those three things out of this movie, it literally looked like it was set in the 1950s, and that was a problem. Like, if you're gonna take the 80s as your setting for this film, you should have went a little bit harder into it. And maybe that's me nitpicking, a little bit weird, maybe I'm a little upset because I didn't get a scene of these kids hanging out playing the original Nintendo or something like that. Yes, we got one kid playing Street Fighter in an arcade, and that was cool, but I don't know, I just wanted a little bit more with the 80s setting, and I felt like they kind of didn't really do much with that. I mean, hell, even the bicycles these kids ride look like they're from the 1950s. That being said, I went into this movie knowing coming out of it I wasn't going to be scared. It's not really a scary movie for me personally. It's more about the story, the setting, the characters, and Stephen King is the master of that when it comes to writing, and it shows in this movie. It shows in this 2017 film adaptation of It that this was a powerful book 30 years ago, and the story is still very fresh today. It's updated a little bit, but it's not updated to the point that it seems ridiculous, if that makes any sense to you. So I really enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed it from beginning to end. One of the best aspects I'll say about the movie is a lot of times when I go to a movie, I'm looking at my phone at one point like, all right, how much more is left? I didn't do that once in this movie. I was glued from the beginning to the end throughout the entire thing. I'll be honest, the last 30 minutes of the movie, I really had to use the bathroom, and I held it, and that's a testament to how much I enjoyed this movie. I wanted to see this movie to the end without, getting up in the middle of it and missing a pivotal scene in it. Only other gripe I have, the CGI I think is used very well in this movie. It's very minimalistic, but when it is used, it looks good for the most part. There was one specific scene involving the said woman in the painting that the one kid is afraid of. When they first show this thing, it looks bad. It looks like a really, really bad CGI work. And that was kind of the first moment in the movie where you saw a lot of CG. And at that point, I was like, oh man, if this movie's gonna ruin the CG, that's gonna be a big downfall for me. No, I'm happy to report that the rest of the movie looks great. All the special effects are great. I was also concerned at the end of the movie, if you've ever watched the original It, at the end of the first part of that movie when they fight Pennywise in the sewers, it turns into like its true form, and it looks bad and cheesy by today's standards. I'm happy to say that in this movie they do it justice, and it looks pretty well. All of the computer generated effects fit the movie, and they look really well, and they're not overdone. And that's something that I like in horror, especially now. I'm one of those people that's so nitpicky when it comes to using computer generated effects in movies. I mean, a prime example is Star Wars The Force Awakens. For the most part, that movie looks incredible. However, the one scene in that movie where they finally introduce Han Solo for the first time in 30 years, and he has those creatures on his ship, those creatures look like cartoon characters, and that took me out of that experience for a little bit, because you look back on the history of Star Wars and how great those movies looked with practical effects, and to just cheapen it by using computer generation really kind of took me out of that movie a little bit. That being said, besides that one little iffy scene of CGI, I thought the CGI looked really good in this movie, and they don't spend a lot of time focusing on that, and that's the important thing. And that's what I like. When CGI is used correctly, you don't focus on it for 10-15 minutes. You do quick shots of it, and that in itself shows what you want to show. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and give 2 thumbs up to Stephen King's It, the 2017 film adaptation. I enjoyed this movie from beginning to end. I'm looking forward to watching it again when it hits 4K Blu-ray later this year. I really like this. If you're a fan of the book, if you're a fan of the 1990 movie series, and you're somebody who didn't go out this past weekend, and you weren't part of the, $120 some million that this movie made in its opening weekend, go see it. You're going to have a great time. You're going to enjoy it. If you were worried that it wouldn't live up to the original 1990 movie, don't worry. Your fears can be put to rest. It's a really good adaptation. You're going to have a lot of fun with it, and it's really good. And I cannot wait for the second half of this whenever they decide to make it. It has been announced. We're just kind of waiting to see who they pick to play these characters grown up and all that. But 2 thumbs way up for It 2017. Really liked it. One of the best movies I've seen this year. One of the best movies I've seen this year in the theater. And it's one that you shouldn't miss. Anyways, guys, remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, until next time.